Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my top waiver wire ads for week number 10 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And if you have any questions about week number 10, please ask down below in the comment section or in our Discord, link down below in the comment section, the pinned comment, and in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 10 top waiver wire pickups. We begin with the running back position, headlined by Jeff Wilson Jr. of the Miami Dolphins going up against the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. Jeff Wilson Jr. is currently owned in 51% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy, so if you play on ESPN, CBS, NFL, any of those other fantasy football platforms, then the ownership percentage is going to be slightly different, though I will note in some cases, depending on the player and the website you play on, there might be a drastic difference in ownership percentage. So Jeff Wilson Jr., his first game in Miami as a Dolphin, this man was the running back number 9 in half PPR last week. Now, obviously, there are running backs that are playing tonight on Monday Night Football, so maybe by the time we get to Tuesday after the Monday Night Football game, Jeff Wilson is running back 12 or something. But right now, prior to Monday Night Football, Jeff Wilson is the running back number 9 on the week in half PPR up against the Chicago Bears in week number 9 in the Windy City. Jeff Wilson Jr. had 9 rushes for 51 yards, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 21 yards, and a touchdown in terms of snap counts for the offense with the running backs, the main 2 running backs, Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson out-snapped Raheem Mostert 28-26, and he out-touched Mostert 12-9. Now, do I think that Raheem Mostert is just dead for fantasy football purposes? No. But what I do believe is that Jeff Wilson is going to continue to see more and more touches and eventually truly eclipse Mostert in terms of fantasy value. Right now, I'm definitely ranking Jeff Wilson Jr. higher than Mostert, but I don't think this means you should just go out and cut Raheem Mostert off of your team. But right now, Jeff Wilson Jr. is my number 1 running back to add, and if you're in dire need of a running back, you definitely want to make him your number 1 waiver wire priority. At number 2, we have Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers, going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week in a riveting primetime matchup, currently owned in 33% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy. Last week for the Panthers, without Chuba Hubbard, D'Onta Foreman shit the bed big time up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. We had Raheem Blackshear, who sounds like a fake name created in Madden, stepped up. He stepped up big in that game and actually played really well for fantasy football. But if Hubbard is back this week, it would be impossible to see Blackshear having an actual role in this offense. Now, again, Hubbard has not played since week number 7 up against the Bucs. But in that game, he was the running back number 18 in half PPR, having 9 rushes for 63 yards and a score, as well as having 2 receptions on 3 targets for 10 yards. So if Chuba Hubbard returns this week, he could really put a huge damper on the D'Onta Foreman parade, which was already dampered by the awful fucking performance up against the Bengals on Sunday. Next up, we got the Gus Bus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. He is going to be on bye this week in week number 10, 51% owned. Now, Edwards was injured in week number 8 up against the Buccaneers, and he is doubtful to play tonight because I'm recording this on Monday, and I would be genuinely shocked if we saw him suit up in this matchup on Monday Night Football. In his last full game that he actually played, his last full game was up against the Browns at home in week number 7, having 16 carries for 66 yards and 2 scores and 1 target in that game, and he was the running back number 8 in half PPR in week number 7. So while Gus Edwards isn't the most talented running back in the NFL, I definitely think he is the best running back in this backfield, even when J.K. Dobbins returns, because honestly, I don't think when J.K. Dobbins returns, he's the J.K. Dobbins that we are used to. I think that injury is going to continue to linger and hurt him, and I think when Gus Edwards returns, he has real upside to be a top 12 running back weekly. Now, that's hard to say for sure, right? Because they have Lamar Jackson, they have Justice Hill, they have these other running backs that they are going to end up using. They have Kenyon Drake, but I still do think Gus Edwards has a boatload of upside in Baltimore. Next up, we move to Rashad with 2 A's Whites, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the Seattle Seahawks at home in Tampa, 34% owned. Last week, he was running back number 30 in half PPR, tied with David Montgomery. In that game up against the LA Rams, he had 8 carries for 27 yards, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 7 yards. Now, Rashad White is definitely still a handcuff, right? You're not going to pick up Rashad White this week up against the Seattle Seahawks and play him in your lineup expecting 8+ points, right? Maybe he gets 8 points. Maybe he gets lucky, but he's definitely not going to do that great. But we have seen that the team kind of wants to use him more. They kind of want to scale back the touches that Fournette is getting in the rushing game because they want to dump the ball off to him a bunch. And thus, we see more Rashad White. And knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, but if something was to happen to Rashad, or if something was to happen to Leonard Fournette and he was to get banged up, then Rashad White might genuinely be a top 12 running back in fantasy football. We are now in week 10. Week 10. The playoffs are quickly approaching, and if you have Leonard Fournette, you need to make sure you have his handcuff. You need to make sure it's officially handcuffing season. You need to make sure that if your prized possession running back gets hurt, you're not absolutely skull-fucked because someone else picks him up off the waiver wire, his backup. So you need to make sure you have your backup, and Rashad White is a perfect example at that. Speaking of another example of a handcuff, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the New Orleans Saints, 7% owned on Yahoo. The Steelers were on bye last week. Last week was the bye-pocalypse. I'm sure you guys remember I had a whole team where my whole entire bench was on bye. The whole fucking bench. And most of those guys were guys I was starting were on bye last week. He was the running back number 30 in week number 8.5 PPR in that game up against a stout Philadelphia Eagles offense in Philadelphia. 5 rushes for 50 yards, 3 receptions on 3 targets. I do not understand at all. I was a big Najee Harris fan in the offseason. Everyone was talking down to him. I was like, Najee Harris was better than people thought. Doesn't matter if it's kissing Teddy Trubisky. Doesn't matter if it's Pickett. They're going to dump off the ball to Najee Harris. And Najee Harris has been so fucking bad that Mike Tomlin, who loves having a workhorse running back. He probably, people have like the I love mom tattoo. This guy has a tattoo probably that says I love workhorse running backs, and yet Jaylen Warren looks so impressive that I think he's going to have to change his whole fucking philosophy on coaching because Najee Harris is complete and utter dog shit. So I think it is entirely possible that Jaylen Warren actually takes over as the lead back. Now maybe these are crazy dreams I have, but at this point, it feels possible. Now we move to the wide receiver position, headlined by another Pittsburgh Steeler, George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, if he's also a Pittsburgh Steeler, going up against you guessed it, the New Orleans Saints, 56% owned. Chase Claypool was traded to the Chicago Bears. So now, George Pickens is very clearly either the number 1 or the number 2 wide receiver on this team. And with how Deontay Johnson has produced, even with the fact that he is getting an ass load of targets every single game, it almost feels like Pickens is the guy. And Pickett and Pickens have this A1 steak sauce connection, 5G LTE level connection. Again, the Steelers, they were on bye. His last game was in week number 8 up against the Eagles. And in that game, it wasn't great. And when I say it wasn't great, it was actually awful. He had 3 targets for 0 receptions. In week 7 up against the Dolphins, though, in prime time, Sunday night football in week 7, 6 receptions on 6 targets, 6 for 6 for 61 yards and a touchdown. George Pickens has proved this season that he is legit. And I know Chase Claypool wasn't sucking in a crazy amount of targets, but taking him away from this equation makes me feel even more confident in George Pickens. The matchup is so-so against the Saints. We'll see how that defense plays tonight up against the Ravens. But even with that said, I still think George Pickens is very clearly the number 1 wide receiver to be adding on the week. I know he's owned in 56% of leagues, so the rest of these wide receivers are much more likely to be available. But before we get into those other wide receivers, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends, our sponsor. They've been on your screen this whole entire video, DraftKings Sportsbook. If you are a brand new user to DraftKings Sportsbook and you click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment down below, you can get this beautiful offer. It's amazing. You bet $5 on any pre-game money line, any sport, and you'll get $200 in free bets on DraftKings Sportsbook if your team wins. So, if your team wins, maybe you don't want to take some crazy underdog. What you want to do is head on over to college football, because those bets, there are teams that are humongous favorites where it seems very likely that they're going to win. Now, anything can happen. Anything can happen, right? Missouri can beat Tennessee, but Tennessee is favored in a big way. So I'd pick either Tennessee to beat Missouri or Michigan to beat Nebraska. And once that happens, you will have turned $5 into $200 in free bets that you can bet on any sport. Again, you have to be a new user to DraftKings, and you have to click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment. Make sure that you guys do that. If you're new to sports betting, you're new to DraftKings, make sure you guys check that out. The offer isn't going to be available forever, so take advantage now before it is gone. Back on into things, we got the wide receiver position at number 2 with DeAndre Carter of the LA Chargers going up against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. 31% owned for DeAndre Carter, who was the wide receiver 27.5 PPR last week in that game up against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. He had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 53 yards. And now Mike Williams obviously out for at least the next couple of games. Keenan Allen is fucking nowhere to be found. Every single week, for some fucking reason, I try to talk myself into the fact that, oh, Keenan Allen's coming back. He's coming back, and he's never coming back. It feels like he's never coming back. Now, if he does return, I'm going to look like a fucking buffoon, because for weeks, I'm like, this guy's going to come back. Last week, I say he's not coming back. He didn't return. I don't think he's going to come back this week either. This is a tough matchup up against the Niners, but with that said, if it's a tough matchup, they're going to have to throw a lot, and Justin Herbert, the pervert's number 2 receiver, if Allen misses, is going to be DeAndre Carter. They obviously have Joshua Palmer as well. They have Austin Eckler, as well as Mr. Gerald Everett. But at the end of the day, DeAndre Carter's the number 2 receiver on a team that's going to have to throw the ball if Allen doesn't play. Makes sense that Carter could potentially be a top 32 wide receiver for another week in a row. Next up, we move to Odell Beckham Jr., OBJ of... doesn't have a team yet, free agent, 23% owned. Now, Jay Glazer reported that we should see Odell Beckham Jr. being ready and cleared extremely soon. Now, has Jay Glazer said some shit that was incorrect before? Definitely. But seeing that report and how widely it was spread, seems like it's probably true. And based upon the research that I've done, I whipped out the fucking microscope, did some research. Seems like the teams that want Odell the most are the Bills, the Rams, the Cowboys, and the 49ers. Could he go to the Jets or something? I don't think he's going to go to the Jets, but could he go to some other team? Yeah, of course. But it seems like those are the 4 most likely teams. Again, the Rams, the Bills, the Cowboys, and the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, if he goes to the Cowboys, that would be the best possible scenario, but if he ends up on any of those teams, he's a guy that you would want on your fantasy football roster. Next up, we got DPJ Donovan Peoples-Jones of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami, 21% owned on Yahoo. The Browns were on bye in week number 9, so we got to go ahead and hop in the time machine and look back to week number 8 for his stats in that game up against the Cincinnati Bengals. He went 4 for 4, 4 receptions on 4 targets, 4 for 4, like he was at Wendy's for 81 yards. The Dolphins defense just got absolutely sodomized. They just got butt-fucked 50 Shades of Grey style by Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. Now, hopefully the Dolphins defense, as a Dolphins fan, I hope we can figure it out. I hope we figure something out. I hope Josh Boyer takes his head directly out of his asshole and figures something out. But right now, this Dolphins defense looks like an unmitigated disaster. The Browns offense looks pretty solid. They look really good. So I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is the number 2 receiver there, has a decent amount of value. And maybe you will have even more value once Deshaun Watson starts for the team, and that's only just a couple of weeks away. The fact that it's already week 10, it does not feel like it's week 10 already. But Nick, it's week 9 tonight, Monday Night Football. You get what I mean, though. It's incredibly fast how quick the season can go. Next up, we got Terrace Marshall Jr., wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, going up against the Atlanta Falcons on Thursday Night Football, 6% owned. Wide receiver 16.5 PPR last week. Back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 games with 6+ targets. Need to start putting some respect on Terrace Marshall's name. Week 9 up against the Cincinnati Bungles in Cincinnati, where the Panthers got absolutely butt-fucked without the use of lube. 3 receptions on 6 targets for 53 yards and a touchdown. Solid game out of them. 2 solid games in a row. Now they have a quarterback issue. PJ Walker is starting this week. But how long of a leash does he have? We saw Baker last week come in relief. I'm not necessarily super comfortable playing Terrace Marshall, but the matchup is certainly great because that Falcons defense is no bueno. Next up, we move to the quarterback position, headlined by Justin Fields, quarterback of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Detroit Lions, owned in 69% of leagues. Very nice. I like 69. Very funny. I'm surprised he's not owned in like 85% of leagues. Quarterback 1 last week. Week 9 up against the Dolphins. Like I said, he literally ran a train on the Dolphins defense. 15 rushes for 178 yards and a touchdown. 17 completions on 28 attempts for 123 yards. And not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns up against the Dolphins. 4 total fucking touchdowns. 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. 3 games in a row with over 20 points. 5 solid games in a row, and now he gets the Lions. Now I know the Detroit Lions locked Aaron Rodgers up and threw away the fucking key. They absolutely embarrassed Green Bay. Embarrassed. Dan Campbell, basically, you ever seen one of those old movies where they take the kid that was getting bullied and they fucking attach a hook to his underwear and they shoot him up the flagpole? That's basically what Dan Campbell just did to Aaron Rodgers. But Justin Fields isn't Aaron Rodgers, which is funny because, like, making fun of Aaron Rodgers, like as if Aaron Rodgers isn't one of the better quarterbacks ever. But Rodgers has sucked ass this year. Justin Fields has looked downright incredible. The rushing upside is immense, and I don't know how the fuck the Lions are going to stop that. No idea. The Lions have the worst defense in the NFL, so Justin Fields could literally be the number 1 quarterback again in fantasy football in the week. Next up, we got Marcus Mariota, quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. 33% owned for Marcus Mariota, quarterback 22 last week up against the Chargers. 12 completions on 23 attempts for 129 yards, 5 rushes for 24 yards. An incredibly bad game out of Mariota, but he is still throwing the ball more, which is promising, but not the best up against the Chargers. We did see Cordero Patterson go to Pound Town. Last time the Falcons played the Carolina Panthers was in Week 8. And in that game, 20 completions on 28 attempts for Mr. Mariota, 253 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 6 rushes for 43 yards. Now, I know on paper this game sucks. I know. Thursday Night Football has been abysmal this year. But this game could be a back and forth, tit for tat, rock'em sock'em robots level shootout. I'm excited for this one. I really am. Mariota, number 2 quarterback to be streaming on the week. Number 3, we got Danny Dimes, quarterback of the New York Football Giants, going up against the Houston Texans. 40% owned on Yahoo. Was on bye last week, so we got to look back to week number 8. Take that, rewind it back. Quarterback 24 in week 8. Bad game. 17 completions on 31 attempts for 176 yards, 6 rushes for 20 yards. Is what it is, right? He had a down game in week 8. That's okay. Now he gets one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I know I've made fun of a couple defenses in this video, but the Houston Texans could be up there as the worst defense in the NFL. So while Daniel Jones isn't the best, I still think he could succeed in this matchup. Now to the tight end position, headlined by Greg Dulcich. And if I'm being honest with you, if you need a tight end, you could add this guy as your number 1 waiver wire pickup on the week. This guy's been downright incredible since he became the starting tight end on this team. So 3 solid games in a row since he's been activated. He's owned in 34% of leagues and was on bye last week, so we got to jump back to week 8. Tight end number 9 in that game up against the Jaguars at Jacksonville, but in London. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 87 yards. Russell Wilson loves throwing to the tight end, which we did not see a lot of in Seattle, but hey, it's Greg Dulcich season, baby. I love Greg Dulcich this week up against the Titans. Next up, we got Cole Kmet. Now, the tight end pool isn't very deep. Not very deep at all. Chicago versus Detroit, 23% owned. I don't trust Cole Kmet worth anything. Don't trust him at all. But something's got to be said on how good Justin Fields has looked and how Kmet has been more involved than he was earlier in the season. Tight end 2 last week against the Dolphins. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns. The guy looks good. He looks good. The question is, will we see repeated usage from him? Now, again, I don't feel super confident playing him, but he's playing up against the terrible Lions defense, so if there ever was a week to feel confident in playing him, it would be this week up against the Lions. To close things out at the tight end position and to close out today's video, Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Seattle Seahawks at home in Tampa, 11% owned, tight end number 4. Last week in half PPR in that game up against the Rams at home in Tampa as well. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 68 yards, 1 yard off of being very nice, I like, with 69 and a touchdown. Now, the problem is Tom Brady actually back or no? Or are we the wool being put over our eyes? Because Tom Brady looked good in that game. Genuinely, like, the eye test shows you he looked good. The stats say he looked bad. But if you watch the game, this guy's fucking, like, he hit a guy in basically the face with the ball. Guy didn't catch it. He's hitting guys in, like, the chest. They're not catching it. So, I don't know. I hope this is a high-scoring game against Seattle. It has the makeup to be. So, hopefully, K. Dotton has a good game. But again, the tight ends on the waiver wire are down. Astronomical. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Make sure you ask any questions about week number 10 down below in the comments section or in our Discord. Hope you guys ended up enjoying. Make sure you check out that DraftKings Sportsbook link if you are a new user. Bet $5 on any pregame money line. Win $200 in free bets if your bet wins. Plus the money from your original bet. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Love you guys all. Have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, goodbye.